Oh man, speaking of demons, I know we're going to talk about abduction today, but I wore I'm going to take off my headset real quick and show you what I wore cuz I got to show you the earrings.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can see these in the video, but I'll hold them up.
What are they? They worlds? Are they the moon?
There you go.
Is it a moon?
It's wire wrapped. Pass that around. It's wire wrapped to look like a particle.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
And I wore this spiral necklace today. Also,
Was this all intentional for
it was
tonight?
all intentional. It's got 3 spirals, concentric spirals.
Uh-huh.
And I'll take the earring off because it's hard with the headphones. But today is the day that CERN was reactivated.
Yeah, let's flip the switch today.
Yeah. And the CERN is the Hadron Collider particle accelerator in Geneva, Switzerland. And I actually went to visit that facility in Geneva in 2019. When I was in the spring, I was visiting a friend who is at the United Nations. And I got to sit in on some hearings on crimes against humanity, the Council on Human Rights. I got some pictures of myself.
Different than Cards Against Humanity.
Yes, completely different than Cards Against Humanity. And I got to wear the special headphones where people were talking in whatever language.
Translator.
Right.
And it was instantaneous translation and these things. And I was in a glass room above the floor and I could see everything that was happening. And, it was a lifelong dream to be there, to hear different conversations around the planet from different civilizations and how they view things. It was really fascinating, and it was at one point it was exhilarating, the fulfillment of a lifetime dream for me to be there and be in the presence, and then at the same time disappointing because
There was no black hole being produced.
no, hold on, there was no resolution to the conversations people were having. They were very passionate, but at the end of any day, there was no action.
Yeah.
It was all words.
Yeah.
It was posturing. It was proselytizing, maybe a big word. But then there was no resolution. Nobody did anything, and nothing had teeth. So it's kind of like that scene in Star Wars where you have that huge, the Senate, and everyone's, from all these planets and all these galaxies and all these species, and then the little thing would flow down and they would talk and nothing would ever happen. And it was very disturbing because I'm like, that's our planetary governance right there. It's completely impotent. Mm-hmm. It was frustrating for
and that's
someone.
how it was at the end? I mean,
yes.
the days that went past that,
yes.
there was
That's how it was.
Happened.
No, nothing happened. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of papers written, a lot of positions shared, but that was it. And so then I'm like, all right, well, what else does Geneva have besides gorgeous environment, really expensive food that was delicious, and mountains everywhere. So nice. It was a beautiful place. I went to see the Collider.
Yeah.
And I got to go inside this area. I have photos of this. And then I got to go in the, quote, junkyard, which is in this atrium area. And I have pictures of myself with these contraptions, is all I can call them, with, exquisite explanations of what they do. Most of them are just thermal management, heat management, And this one thing was as big as the studio we're in. And it was all made of copper. And then there was a lot of stainless steel and other elements. But because copper is such a special material, it's antimicrobial, antibacterial. It's nothing can live on the surface of copper. It disintegrates any virus in seconds. So it's a special. Gold is also quite special, but I didn't see anything made of gold, though there are conduits potentially made of gold. But so being at that collider, I was overcome by how interesting it was that man was trying to produce a particle, that man was trying to become God, and that nobody really understands what it is that they're doing.
Right.
You know, I'll say nobody. I know that's rude. But I would say in general, we as humans have a notion that this thing will happen if we do X, Y, Z. But I gotta say, I'm not really sure people know. And the thing was down for maintenance when I was there. It was down for like 3 years.
Whoa.
And they've just turned it back on.
Yeah, what I heard today was it was because the people that run it, it was basically just because of COVID.
But it was down for maintenance in 2019. But I guess maybe in 2020 it was supposed to come back online, and then it took
just
another.
Sent people home and
it just took another year. That makes sense. Maybe a year and a half.
So what didn't they get like a little bit of a black hole real quickly? Did something happen? What happened?
I think they were able to. They discovered behaviors of particles that they'd never seen before.
Right.
And essentially, they're trying to unlock what makes, I'll say it's a micro black hole. Yes. It's, at the end, it would be opening time and space portal.
Right.
That's what it will do, is my understanding. Now they're wrapping it in scientific language about quarks and subquarks and things like
Right.
that, but obfuscating what is truly happening, which is essentially opening parallel dimensions. And I can't help but think to myself that this sounds a whole lot like what happened in Atlantis. Atlantis sunk into the ocean, but that's not the point. The reason Atlantis sunk into the ocean was because one of the theories is that they were tampering with crystal energy, and the energy got too much, and they had to make a choice. And the choice was to either blow up the whole planet, like destroy the core, or, do something that was less destructive but still very destructive, creating, tidal waves, tsunamis that did wipe out civilization. Not all civilization, but a big portion of it.
I've never heard this theory. That's a good one.
It is a substantial theory that's been circulating recently, and it almost feels like this Higgs boson, this particle accelerator, is just another version of that same hubris, that same human, tampering with things you don't understand for an unhealthy reason. It's about power and control versus, how much love can we spread in the world? Why would you open up a new dimension? What are you going to do when you get there? Do you know if it's a lower dimension or a higher dimension? What are you doing? So again, I don't know the answers to this. I'm just like, I've read a lot. I've heard a lot. The fact that when you walk into the facility, there is this beautiful statue of Shiva the Destroyer that was gifted to them by the Indian government.
Oh.
And it is, Shiva is the destroyer of worlds. So I find it quite intriguing that would be the one deity that they chose to represent this monumental human achievement in particle physics. So I wore this today. I wore the earrings and the necklace, and then I have a cross on my shirt, which you can't see. It's too faint, but it's like a cross. And the reason is I'm just juxtaposing science and religion in my own little way. So thanks for listening to my rant. But I mean, we're here so far, but we don't know if in the coming months and days, as the accelerator keeps moving and gets online and different experiments are happening, I don't know. Pay attention.
And did you guys ever hear that it was on Coast to Coast? I think it was about the guy who was talking with like shamans somewhere in the desert. It was either or it was Utah, but there was a door. There was like a stone door, and it had a little indentation on it. And that was after talking with him for years, getting them to trust him. They told him what the deal was, and he had to put his forehead. This is fascinating.
I think you talked about it. I think his name was like Timothy Wells.
That's it. That's the guy, and he was on there talking about it. He was on there twice, and so
South America.
It's South America, yeah.
So that's right, and in three frequencies, tone on tone, he ended up getting in.
He had like his wife there.
His wife was there. Yeah. She saw it. He shook, vibrated, and disappeared. And what he said, do you remember this story? Well, it kind of goes with what you're saying right there.
He's like, hold my beer, Priscilla.
I'm going in. So he gets in there, and he kind of goes through this whole wormhole thing, and then kind of spits out in an all-white room.
Yeah.
And there was a voice, and it was almost like he's in a room, and they're kind of like watching him from up above. But he started talking with this entity. And the entity basically said, wow, I can't believe you're here. And it's only a few times this has ever happened. And they got to talking, and the guy said, well, what is all this? I mean, what is the universe? The big question. Mm-hmm. And the guy, the voice said, well, actually, your universe is an experiment gone wrong. That we basically created this, and it kept growing and growing and growing, and we didn't know how to shrink it and stop it. So instead of stopping it, we became part of it. And now we have let it grow, but we come through this portal to take samples and to investigate from time to time. But it was truly an experiment gone wrong.
Yeah, I've heard.
Is what our universe is.
I have heard the hypothesis about the Earth being a living library, and where many galactic races contributed their DNA, and it's basically an experiment. We're
Big
like
experiment.
a planetary petri dish. Hey, I certainly think there's room for that. And it, marching on toward our topic today of abduction and what that means, it makes a lot of sense, right? There's so many hypotheses around why these abductions, assuming that they do happen, why they happen.
Right.
And I think that there's so many stories from so many people that are very similar.
Why would they care about little old us? What is it that,
What is
why
it?
would you come down here and deal with us? There's a lot to it. This is my favorite topic.
Yeah.
I think I've been kind of searching out this stuff anytime, anywhere I hear it, I see it, I get really into it. I just enjoy listening to it because it's everyday people telling extraordinary stories. Yeah. This isn't somebody who's wrote 14 books on the topic. These are just real people. Some of them really don't want to be there. Some of them are terrified to even bring it up. And it's amazing how similar these stories are. I mean, it truly is. And I love the everyday real people aspect to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and in previous episodes, we've talked about, history and the hieroglyphs and different markings in different places of the world. And even it coming up in stories like the Noah,
Sure.
I mean, that was kind of like an abduction, and Jesus,
The Book of Enoch. I mean,
Enoch.
that was kind of all an abduction story.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So, I mean, and then you fast forward to when we have the age of technology, and you have actual things that can record, So, like, one thing that has always kind of bothered me is if there are things happening, how come there isn't more evidence? You know, and I mean, and this is not just UFOs, all things like paranormal, Sasquatch, you know, ghosts. It was, not to go too far off topic, but like I used to watch that show Ghost Hunters religiously.
Yeah.
And, you know, like me and my mom, that was one thing that me and my mom always had in common was this kind of thing. And we'd always be like, hey, they're going to be at such and such next week. You going to watch? Yeah. But it was always like, you know, oh, did you catch that? Oh, it was like what do they call it? Like when something tugged on, you know, it's like nothing that was caught evidence-wise.
Yeah. They're always
like a
oh,
personal experience.
Did you hear that? No,
Yeah. It's like, oh, it touched me, like a burn mark.
Right. It got warm right here.
Yeah. But like
It went up 2 degrees.
one of the earliest stories that has been recorded was in 1957, and it was this dude. I don't know if you heard about it, Antonio Villas Baos.
And now, are we at abduction or are we at ghost?
Abduction.
Ooh.
Antonio Villas Baos. He was a young guy, and he was a farmer. He worked on a farm in Brazil. And he was out late at night, and he was with his brother, and they saw these lights in the sky. And this was like in October-ish. And he was like, that's so crazy. What are these lights? They're like going different directions. And
What part of the country?
Brazil. I don't know what part. It's
Brazil?
in rural Brazil.
Okay, right.
And about 5 days later, and they like to work at night because at that time of the year in October, it's scorching hot. And so they would work in the fields at night. And he was out by himself, and he saw this. And this is like almost gives me the chills when I think of it. He saw that same light, but this time he was by himself, and he ran back to his tractor, which like wasn't a tractor like we see today where it's enclosed. This was just a tractor, right? And so the object got real close, and he noticed now this isn't just a light; it's an actual object. And so he booked back to his tractor. He's like, screw this. So he goes back to his tractor.
I'm going to go 10 miles an hour home.
Screw this. Yeah.
He's like, I want to go back to my tractor. So he goes back to his tractor, and as he's getting up onto his tractor, something grabs his arm.
Oh.
And he turns around, and it's a being.
Uh-huh.
And he drew a picture of it, and it's like about 3 or 4 foot tall, and it's wearing a suit, and it's got a glass thing over him. And he yanks off, and he goes to run, and as he turns this way, there's 3 more of those beings. And they're strong, and they wrestle him to the ground. And they take him, and they do tests on him. And when they put him in this, no, they don't do tests on him because they let him go. But what did happen was they put him in a white room that was completely square, couldn't see anywhere, and this thing came out of the ceiling and sprayed this, like emitted this fog. And this door opened, and here comes like a woman, and she's naked, but she's not human. She's like a humanoid type thing.
Oh.
Like a hybrid?
Yeah.
Like some kind of a hybrid.
Yeah.
And that what he thinks that smoke was some kind of aphrodisiac.
Sure.
Because he has sex with this thing. And next thing you know, he's down on the ground. That thing's gone. It just zips out of the sky. And he doesn't really tell anybody. And then it just comes up with this researcher. It's like this journalist. That's what it is, a journalist. And the journalist brings him to this college nearby. And so they run these tests on him. And this is all documented. They run these tests on him. And one of the things they run on is this radiation and the levels of radiation in this dude's body was like off the charts.
That's always one that they can find. That is the one thing that is always across the board is consistent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's kind of like where that story stops. It was widespread around the globe. This story was in, back then it was like National Enquirer.
This
or
is
whatever.
before Betty and Barney Hill?
Yeah, this was, because that was in the 60s.
I guess the Betty and Barney Hill was really more about the first American story,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Betty and Barney Hill was September 19th and 20th of 1961.
Right.
Barney passed away in 69.
Mm-hmm.
But, when was Roswell?
47.
47. So
Is that right?
I
Make
don't
sure
actually
it's
know.
at 47.
I thought it was in the 50s.
nothing,
That was an amazing year. There were a lot of things that happened in
I thought it was
47.
in the 50s, but
nothing.
No, it's definitely 47.
I think it was 47. Check that out.
Yeah.
Google that
Got
stuff.
it.
So in
Roswell.
1961, Betty and Barney Hill. Oh, one thing I found out while I was doing
1947, July 7th.
ooh.
What's today?
Oh my
July
gosh.
What's today?
6th.
Oh, all right, scrap it. Let's do this tomorrow.
Wait, the
July
5th.
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 Is it the
Yeah,
5th?
we got so it's the week.
It's
the
almost
week.
anniversary.
Yeah. Interesting.
Barney Hill was born on July 20th of 1922.
Wow.
100 years ago. Next week, he was born.
Oh. That was so. What's in? I've done a lot on the Betty and Barney Hill. Matter of fact, there's a book called Captured. Book to me, everything is. I listen to my books.
Sure.
It's like a liquid lunch. But it was over a 20-hour one, and I just finished it not too long ago. It's called Captured. And they went through everything that was written. They just read it verbatim. Her diaries they read verbatim. All the therapy sessions and the when they put them under hypnosis, all those parts were to it. But that was interesting because that happened in what year did you say?
61.
And they were an interracial couple.
Mm-hmm.
Right there is a big clue. Why the hell would they want any sort of
To draw attention
to themselves?
Yeah.
And he was part of the AA. What was his?
NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was a chair member there,
Yeah,
wasn't he?
he was the head of the NAACP in New Hampshire.
Yeah. So I mean, they both have great lives going. I mean, they're definitely.
She was a social worker. I mean, she had a degree. She was college educated. He was a postal.
Yeah, that's
worker
right. Yeah, and they were on their way back from their honeymoon
in Montreal, Canada.
in Montreal, Canada, is when it all happened in a car,
And if
driving along at night.
if you look at the stretch of road where this happened, it was in Indian Head Mountains. It's part of New Hampshire, and there's to this day there's nothing. It's like the most pristine, untouched forestry in the country. So there's nothing around there. So if you even
man.
like get a flat tire,
Yeah.
well, I mean,
You're not going to really have any support.
yeah, it's so it's hard to outrun anything, let alone something in the sky.
And they had just stopped at a diner not too long before that. And Barney had looked at the clock, because, they needed to recognize time. And for whatever reason, they looked at the clock. But after their abduction experience, both their watches had stopped at that exact moment when it all happened. So that's interesting, too, is that they kind of have a time frame,
Oh, yeah.
even an exact time when some of this was going on. But real quick into this story, just a real headline, because there's just so many of them. But this was so, this is iconic because of it being the first one, and they were so well documented. So let me get this right. They're driving down the road. They see lights. I think there was 3 lights. They kept coming closer and closer, and then they started following the car, but they still were in light form. They weren't close enough to see that it was an object.
Right.
Eventually, as they're driving, it was coming closer and closer, and they weren't scared. They were fascinated. Matter of fact, Betty was fascinated about this the whole rest of her life. Barney was not. Barney did not want anything to do with this. This was rough for him. Mm-hmm. But back to the story. They pull over to the side of the road. It comes closer. They can see that it's some sort of object. Barney gets out with his binoculars, starts looking at it through the binoculars. He said that he saw a window and saw a being inside it. Mm-hmm. Again, he wasn't completely scared. He seemed to be kind of okay. He was well balanced. He wasn't off his rocker about it. That's almost when it all went dark. They don't have a lot of recollection. They got a lot of recollection after they went into therapy, and John Mack and a couple of the other famous therapists end up doing a regression on them.
But this was a regression hypnotherapy where they go into a trance state.
Right.
It's not like they're just remembering.
Right. Because the next thing they know, they're back in their car. That's when their watches had stopped, obviously. They both talked about it as an interesting experience. I mean, and he did say he saw something in the window, so it was a big conversation. It wasn't like we just saw some lights. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't even close to what had happened to them. I mean, they were both sore. They both felt kind of beaten up, but they didn't have an understanding of why. And they got back to the house, and there were these dots on their car, almost like shiny stainless steel. They said it was about a $50 size, and there were many of them, and they were just on the car in a pattern. They couldn't figure out what that was. It was strange to them. Later on, they ended up putting a compass on it, and it just whacked out the compass everywhere they went with it. And Betty's dress, the zipper was broken. There was a hole ripped in her dress.
Because those little gray men don't know how to
Yeah.
Use a zipper,
right,
huh?
Right.
And did you, before we go into the regression, she said 6 weeks later they go out to dinner. And when they get back home, she walks into the house and there's a pile of leaves on the counter or table or whatever.
Yep.
And she's like, why would somebody come in, like, Barney, why would you put up? And he's like, I didn't do anything.
Right.
So she goes up and looks at the pile of leaves, and right there on the pile of leaves is her earrings that she was wearing that night.
Oh, man.
That were missing.
And she didn't even really realize that the earrings were missing until she saw them there.
And they brought them back.
back. So they knew something happened.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Especially because they were missing that time. And Barney just wouldn't let it go. He just would not let it go. He's like, why?
Yep.
What happened? What happened? They kept talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And then somebody, you might know, came in and said, why don't you try?
Yeah. Simon was, his last name was Simon, and he ended up being one of the first therapists. But they really didn't want this out. Barney didn't want it out because of his work. Sure. And, he was in the AACP, and there was a lot there that he didn't need to. So they weren't going to tell anybody, but it took like 2 days before Betty told her sister, and then somebody else told somebody. And the next thing you know, it turns into a big thing.
All over the place.
Yeah, and it went public pretty quick. I mean, it ended up being a headline story. No, that's probably not true. I don't think it was a headline, but it was in one of the papers, and everybody read the papers back then.
I know what it was. There was a astronomy magazine.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and the guy who wrote the story about this,
that's right,
6 weeks later was let go.
Yep.
Because it became, that magazine became a mockery in the science field. Mm-hmm. And
that's right.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but he
so deliberate, such a deliberate.
Yeah, and it had to do, and I think maybe that was after she was talking about like what they found out in the age regret or the.
Yeah, that wasn't the first part, and the thing about that one is that guy ended up kind of slamming them too. If that's the same one, there were many articles, but there was one specifically.
Yeah.
That made them out to be frauds. And it turned the whole thing upside down. What was going to be kind of a fascinating experience ended up being very, very dark after that. Barney had some real mental issues with
Sure.
it. Betty, you know, they all suffered after that quite a bit.
When your integrity is just completely obliterated
Yeah.
and you don't have any recourse.
Well, yeah. How can they?
Yeah.
What can they do
can't
besides the
prove it.
regressions? Yeah.
You can't prove it.
So okay, so the story. You can help me with this, right? So what happened was, there was more than 3 to 5 of the beings came out while they were in the car. This is under regression. So what they remember was binoculars. Okay, there was something. Got back in the car and left. But what actually happened is they're standing. He was standing out there. He got back into his car, and when he did, the other beings were walking towards him. They both got both of them out of the car separately.
They took off. They got back into the car. Barney got into the car, and she's like, "What are we gonna do?" And he goes, "We got to get out of here." So he takes off down the road, and about a quarter mile down the road, he turns right for some reason. And she said, "I don't know why he turned right, but he turned right down into this, like, I guess he was trying to just hide." And right when he turned right, there was 5 of them.
Okay,
in
so that's
the
where
road.
it picked. Wow, right? Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. They heard this strange humming sound.
Oh yeah, that's
That-
also
a huge.
that's also
piece of it.
something that everybody says they do.
Yep.
They hear the humming sound, and there's a smell.
Oh, really? Yeah, they didn't
It's
mention
it's
smell.
a particular smell, like a sulfury, ozony smell.
There was odd clanking too, like something coming from the trunk kind of sound, like a clanking. And they never did quite figure that out. Matter of fact, when they got back, their trunk was unlocked. And back then those are big trunks.
Yeah, they were.
You're talking an old 50s car. So
Yeah.
he had his gun in the trunk. So they think at some point he may have gone back. And he brought up the gun a couple times. I got to go get my gun in the regressions. So help me through this. That was great.
So they didn't get back into the car or anything in the woods, and they just take them through the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like walking through. It's completely dark, and they get to the ship.
Yep.
And then they go in.
They separate him
They separate
at that
him.
point.
She can still see him.
Yep.
And these things aren't like aggressive.
No, these are the Greys,
but they're
though.
communicating with her. Somehow.
This is somewhat the typical Grey. I think
Yeah,
they had more of a
telepathic
nose.
communication.
They had a little more of a nose than you typically hear about with the Greys.
Mm-hmm.
But the large almond eyes on the side, about 3.5 feet tall, huge craniums, huge heads, thin necks, long arms, thin body.
Yeah.
Kind of the typical Grey, which is the first time. What's interesting is they can't go and find any of this. This is the very first time this stuff's been talked about.
Sure.
And they're talking about Greys. You know what I mean? And then in all the years after that, the Greys really came out as being something, pretty typical.
Mm-hmm.
But then that's brand new stuff.
Right.
I mean, the giant eyes and everything. Yeah. So, okay, so they separate them and they start doing experiments on them. Now, this is all in the regression. When that started to happen, and they have the tapes, Barney was screaming his head off in the regressions. I mean, it was scary, and it was scary to hear,
Oh, wow.
even here in the book.
This creature, this leader is telling me something.
He's telling you something. How? How is he getting it to you?
I can see it in his face.
Do you see his
Telling
lips
me?
move? Yes.
No, his lips aren't moving.
Yes, go on. He's telling you.
And he's looking at me.
What did he tell you?
Stay there and keep looking. Just keep looking and stay there. And just keep looking. Just keep looking.
Could you hear him tell you?
Oh, I gotta pull these binoculars away from my eyes. 'Cause if I don't, I'll just keep staying there.
Could you hear him tell you this?
Oh, no, he didn't say it.
You felt he said it.
I know.
You know he said
Just
it.
there, yeah. Just stay there, he's saying to me. It's
All right.
pounding in my head. Just
All
don't
right.
pull the binoculars away. God, give me strength.
All right.
Pull them down. Run. Pull these binoculars down and run. God, if there's a God, give me strength. I gotta get away. Oh, Betty.
All right.
We gotta get away, Betty.
All right. Calm down. Calm down.
I'm driving. I gotta
down.
get away.
How could you be sure he was telling you this? Calm down. You're still asleep. How could you be sure he was telling you this?
His eyes. His eyes. I've never seen his eyes before.
But you said they were friendly. You said they were friendly.
Oh, no. Not the leaders. I said only the one looking over his shoulder
Oh, I see. The leader was
was
the...
friendly.
How did you know the other one was the leader?
Because everybody moved. Everyone was standing there looking at me. But everybody moved to these levers or in the back, or they went to this big board. It looked like a board. And only this one with the black shiny jacket and the scarf stayed at the window.
It was amazing. One interesting thing that, tell me if do we have time for this?
Oh yeah, we got plenty of time.
We can move on quick. We'll move through this.
No,
but
it's all good.
it's just a really good one because it's the first one. You know.
Yeah.
It's almost an anniversary too. They took out. This is interesting because they both remembered this. Here's the other thing. They both drew the ship separately. They did that intentionally when they got home. They both drew separate pictures. Now, of course, you can't prove that. You could say they're all together, but they're pretty upstanding people. They drew it separately, and they both came up with the same drawing. And it wasn't just a saucer. It was a saucer with wings. It was a little different. It had wings off the sides. You know, so it wasn't just that saucer disc shape. It had a little something different to it. They both drew that. And they have drawings of the actual creatures too, and they both did the same thing there. There were so many things that were similar, and they spread them apart when they were doing the regressions. It's not like they sat there together. So they got separate, stories, but the stories all kind of matched up. There were little things that were different. People don't remember stuff always
She
the
had
same
a
way.
pregnancy test.
Yep.
And she kept going in the recordings. She just kept going on about her navel because there was a huge needle.
Yep.
And she did not like the needle. And she was like,
yeah.
"What are you doing with that needle?" In the
regression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the therapist was like, "What are they going to do with the needle?" And she's like, "I don't know. They're saying that it's going to be a pregnancy test."
Yeah, and then they jam that thing in there, and you can hear her scream again with, in the regression.
Sort of in the middle of the room is a table, some kind of a table. It's not up very high, about the same height as a desk. So I lie down on the table, on my back, and he brings over this how can I describe it? They're like needles. There's a whole cluster of needles, and each needle has a wire running from it. So then they roll me over on my back. And the examiner has a long needle in his hand. And I see the needle. And it's bigger than any needle I've ever seen. And I asked him what he's going to do with it. And he said, just a simple test, it won't hurt me. And I asked him what. And he said he just wants to put it in my navel. It's just a simple test. And I don't know, it will hurt. Don't do it. Don't do it. And even though it won't hurt. And he sticks a needle into my navel. And spits it. And I'm crying and I tell him it's hurting, it's hurting, it's hurting. Take it out.
They actually have the dress. And in that dress, there is a rip right there.
Right there.
And if you turn it inside out, because they in the old days they had kind of liners in them, and you call it a slip. But it's
a liner.
A liner actually attached to the dress. There are stains right there too.
Blood.
It didn't make it all the way to the dress, so they didn't see that initially. Nobody really pulled it inside out to look for it. But that was just discovered not too long ago. There's a show called UFO Witness. It might be Travel Channel. Anyway,
Travel Channel's got a lot of the good stuff.
They really, I think they do it pretty well too, and they take a good viewpoint on it. Seems like they're pretty honest.
Yeah. They
Whatever
treat
that
it
means.
with respect.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Well, they let the producers just do their thing.
Go with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that happens. The one fascinating thing was, they ended up running over to Betty and was checking her teeth. They put their fingers in her mouth and were kind of like trying to move her teeth because they ended up pulling Barney's dentures out, and they thought, so humans' teeth come out. She had some sort of interaction talk with these guys too. Mm-hmm. This wasn't full on like a silent. There was actually interaction,
conversations.
So Betty had her teeth and Barney had dentures.
And Barney had dentures, but Barney had dentures because of the war. Yeah. There was an explosion, and it took his teeth out. So anyway, that was interesting. They were trying to wiggle her face to see if
they don't know.
You wouldn't know. Maybe you wouldn't know that, right?
Wouldn't necessarily know, like how a zipper works, or
that's not in the human handbook.
What dentures are? No, it's really not.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So anyway,
what
long
else
story
happened?
short,
What other revelations from Betty and Barney?
Well, you know that the University of New Hampshire library has like at least 8 to 16. Like I was reading a little bit, and I mean that's like a big difference, 8 and 16. But there's boxes and boxes and boxes. Yeah, and it's got a list. You can go on the website, and it's got a list of everything that's in each box. Oh. And it's like there's a big like pile of boxes that are all photos, and it's photos of every talk show that they've ever been on.
Oh my!
Every news clipping, and then it's got like there's larger boxes that has like the dress. Yeah.
That's on display, and it's on a display on a case. Yeah. Some of the other pieces.
It's got it. The University of New Hampshire has everything.
That'd be a fun thing to see.
And it's interesting to look and see what is logged, because it's got everything. It's got the tapes of the regressions, everything. It'd be interesting to go and be like, can I take a look? And they're probably like, no.
Yeah.
But they were after it, man. Betty was really determined to make sure that people understood this was real. Barney certainly wanted it to go away, but they worked together. I mean, they were pretty. From what I was reading, they were a pretty damn good couple. You got to think, you're going through this. It'd almost be like, a misborn baby or something. You'd almost split apart just in all your everything you've been through. You'd almost get in silos about it. But they stayed together. They were pretty great as a couple.
Do you know who else had a really tight story? Was the guys from Arizona and Travis Walton.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they all 7 of those guys took lie detector tests, and they all passed them. One guy didn't because he was nervous, and then did the next time.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. Why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, that one, I always wondered why Betty and Barney Hill hasn't actually been And I don't know,
movie?
maybe there is something, maybe there's rights involved. Or
Pretty
whatever.
low budget, some UFO low budget thing that they
No,
like to do.
that could be like a blockbuster.
Absolutely.
I mean, you could sell that. I mean,
Yep.
it was way. I mean, probably along the same strength as Fire in the Sky, but that story was nuts. I mean,
Yeah.
like, because it had not 2 people, but it had 7
Yep.
people,
Yeah.
or 8 with
7.
Travis.
No, I think it was 7 total.
Okay, 6 with Travis.
Yeah.
And
They were all in one truck.
yeah. There was some in the back.
Wow.
There was some in the front.
And they were
Travis
loggers.
Travis had just gotten into a fight with one of them.
Yep.
So there was emotions running already, and they go out and they're loggers,
Yep.
and they're out. I think it's Arizona, right?
Yeah, they were cleaning up after loggers, so I think their job was kind of more environmental. I think it was a government or state job.
Yeah.
So, and one guy was the leader or the boss, and he was the driver of the truck. But they ended up leaving for the night, and it was just getting kind of dusk, or around that time
Yeah.
is when they started heading down the road.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So he spent several days missing.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. He was without a trace. I mean, the stories that were told, the local police were just like, something happened. What did you do to this guy? Where's he at?
Yeah.
So they were interviewing each
Wow.
one of them, and they all had the exact same story.
Yeah.
And
So that story was that Travis was more fascinated than he was anything. The other guys were, at first they didn't know what it was. It was just a light in the woods. And they're like, what could that be? Could it be a forest fire? Could it be something?
Yeah.
Travis got out of the truck and started walking towards it. Eventually, he realized what it was, and he went to touch it. And as he went to touch it, the thing was kind of like either taking off or something was happening, because it was like an electric explosion. And it knocked him clear back, way back, to the point where all those guys thought he was dead.
yeah,
They assumed he
and they
was
took off.
dead, and they left.
They left.
They didn't. Now, they were really weird about taking off, because some of them wanted to go back.
Yeah.
Some of them wanted to go check it out. They weren't, they got so far down the road, and they stopped, and they were like, what are we doing?
We gotta go
We
back.
gotta
We gotta
go back.
for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at that point, everything was gone, and when they went back for him, he wasn't there. And the ship was gone.
Oh, so they took him.
Yep.
They took him.
They took him.
He went up in the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then it gets pretty hairy from there.
Yeah, I mean, he was
Come on.
gone for, like, what was it?
5 days.
5 days.
Whoa. And what happened?
Well.
Watch the movie. Find out.
Yeah. Fire in the
Oh.
Skies, the movie.
Oh, okay.
And Travis actually, he's done the Art Bell show a couple times, and he's told the difference between the movie, and they got some stuff right, but a lot of stuff was kind of theatrics.
Yeah.
Being a movie, you have to change some things. He wasn't upset about it,
Yeah.
but there were quite a few changes.
They didn't want him around
No, right.
because he would get upset at certain things, and they're like, you just need to go.
I think he let it go after a while, because when he was on Art Bell at 2 or 3 times. And the last time matter of fact, the last time he had a whole different view of this thing. So just to complete this one and do this one a little quicker, so we're not going through each one, because there's just so many.
Yeah.
He was taken up there. He basically he wanted to fight them all. He was kind of, but he was so hurt that there wasn't much he could do. But he was pretty vocal, he said, and really anxious, and he had a hard time breathing in the ship. Apparently, he thought it might have something to do with the oxygen level, but he was struggling big time, really struggling. They ended up knocking him out, or whatever they did, and he doesn't remember a lot of that whole thing. He does remember, he said, when he woke up, he was being put onto a base, like a regular, like almost like a military base, and there were humans
Yeah.
Okay.
walking with him, and he tried to talk to the human guy, but the guy wasn't giving him the time of day. Meanwhile, this is all got to be absolutely incredible for this guy, even for him to be able to talk or to say
Right.
something or try to come to reason with what was
And
happening.
this wasn't in the movie.
And this wasn't in the movie. That's right. That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Military pilot came over and said, "You're going to take that out."
Yeah, you're gonna take that out.
Yeah.
I bet you.
So, all that being said, then they dropped him off.
Yeah.
They brought him back and dropped him off. And in the movie, it was next to a gas station. I don't exactly know quite where it was, but interesting part is it was 5 days later. He thought it was just a couple hours, and then when his brother picked him up,
Yeah, he called his brother.
he had a 5-day growth in his beard. And when he realized that, he was like, "Oh my God, this is," and it made
Made
There-
sense.
yeah.
It's gone a while.
yeah.
So what I don't understand is, first of all, the imagery that we see is that there's a ship and there's some kind of force that comes down and pulls people up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think that's the way it happens. Do you?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe a little yes, little no. Could be both. I think light is a big thing that's being transferred. I think they've worked out how light can affect things. They can beam light and affect your mood. I think they can use light to move things. I think they could use light to make things disappear. I think light is kind of the key in most scenarios. What that I've read in the abduction stuff, light is always a huge part of this equation.
Well, if you watch 2001, the sounds that they use that
That's
Stanley
another one.
Kubrick uses during the movie, as I think sound has something to do with it too.
Sound and frequency can move anything.
It can also paralyze you.
Yeah, for sure.
Can it rearrange
Yes,
molecules?
yes.
It wasn't that the idea that it can?
Yes.
They're using it for healing. There's a lot of
Yes.
frequency
All
healing
of
now,
that.
and right.
Yes, all of
I
that.
think we're just getting to the tip of that stuff.
Yeah, we're just understanding that's possible right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think the next 10 years will be really interesting.
The military has weaponized sound.
Yes.
Yep, right.
Yeah, they
And I'm
have.
sure they've done it with light and everything we've talked about. They're 100 years past what we can even talk about.
Just what I don't understand is the methodology, I guess that's the right word.
Behind
right?
the abductions?
Behind the actual physical.
Mm-hmm.
And Travis Walton came out later. He aged and thought about it, and what were you saying? He found out.
Right. He first thought, I mean, like most people would, that, they were out to hurt him. But, of course, I think he had gone and done some therapy on it too. But this was years and years and years after. I mean, the guy's pretty old now. This happened when he was a young
If
man.
they wanted to hurt you or kill you, they just would have.
And why would they have brought you down and put you right in the same spot in
that's-
your town? Why not just dump you out in the mountains
that's-
somewhere or
That's
just
not the agenda.
disintegrate you in space?
It's not the
Yeah,
agenda.
and that's what got him thinking, because he thinks, after all his thought, is that he touched that craft
Yeah.
and it blew him back. And they
Yeah.
were like, "Oh my God, I think we killed this guy."
Yeah.
They grabbed him, they brought him in, and for 5 days they healed him and then dropped him off. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense to me, mainly in my way of thinking, the simple fact that why'd they bring him back?
Yeah. Did he have any regression? Did they regress him?
He did something. I don't think he did the full regression. I don't think he was into
nothing
that.
Intricate was revealed in the regression that was, or hypnosis maybe, just to.
No, not much, but there was. I mean, he has flashes of it.
Okay.
He certainly remembers what they looked like.
But doesn't remember experiments.
Right, he doesn't.
Okay.
No, he doesn't. Which
Yeah.
and they
that's
brought him to a base, and there was,
Sure.
they put him on another bed.
Well,
and there was
that follows the narrative about how Eisenhower made a deal that for technology, you can abduct our people up to a certain number or whatever the deal was, and you can, learn about them or whatever. And while we don't know the intricacies, one of the hypotheses I've heard is that the purpose of the abductions was to get DNA, right? Why? Because the Greys are essentially a future version of humanity that became so disconnected from nature and so disconnected from our original blueprint that they're trying to get back. In fact, they're trying to get back to the original blueprint, which is us. We're still the original blueprint, believe it or not.
You know who came out recently with that theory? Like, I mean, he didn't create this theory, but somebody who came out and was talking about that theory was Josh Groban,
Sure.
the singer.
Sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He
Sure.
had an interview and he just was
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah. And he brought up that theory as like that these things that people see, I guess it's probably because of the recent congressional hearings.
I believe lots of people are finally comfortable talking about it,
Yeah.
as we said at a couple of episodes ago. And I think there's a lot. Why would these beings called Greys, they don't want to kill us, clearly. They could easily do that. I do think there's been cattle mutilations. We have seen those, and not sure what that's about.
But I think you have rogue anything. We have rogue people that,
sure.
And that kind of explains that a little
for
bit.
sport, and there are negative versions of everything, I'll say.
Right.
But I think that the hypothesis about the Greys, not the Greys, but I'll say the beings who abduct us, I think the Greys might just be avatars. That's another theory, that they're just avatars. They're like biological android kind of things that are controlled by an AI, but that their overlords
Those are the tall whites.
Are the tall whites that are the actual humans that have not have failed the initiation. And when I say that, what I mean is another hypothesis. This is a worldview I'm espousing here that kind of fits together. The purpose behind the abduction is to get DNA so that those tall whites, who are humans that failed their initiation because they departed from the blueprint, they became more and more, they spliced their DNA into all different kinds of other animals and other creatures. And every time you splice your DNA, you give up a piece of your soul. You can't get it back. You think about the Voldemort story. Now, in the Voldemort story, it was to preserve a piece of his soul so he couldn't be killed. The real version of this in esoteric literature is that once you do that, it actually splits your soul, and you can't ever reassemble it. And if you look at the DNA, it damages your DNA. And so if you're doing that as a culture, as part of your civilization, is to experiment and do these things, eventually you reach a point where you can't reproduce and you can't get back to where you were.
And they've also said that possibly, again, all theory, is that they kind of bred their emotions out of them.
Exactly.
That,
It
they're
became
not
very
emotional,
logical.
and you never hear of an abduction story with big, high emotions with any of these guys.
No.
They're all
No.
pretty low key.
And also,
No.
I think you said that usually in these stories they come back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing is have you heard of David Paulides?
Mm-mm.
He has books and a couple documentaries.
On fitness?
Oh, that's Pilates.
I know.
Paulides is the missing 411.
Oh, yeah. And in the parks? Oh, the national parks and stuff
where
like that?
people are just missing.
Gone.
They're gone.
Yeah, yeah. The theory about the parks being basically portals to the inner earth
Yeah.
as one thing, and also just like there's not civilization there, so lots of different things can go on.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's what they're for. If you don't want to chance an abduction, don't camp in a park. For God's sake.
If you don't want to be abducted, then
Do
just
not.
stay in your home because it's happening
Do not
every
camp
day.
in your park.
The Eisenhower thing real quick. So his granddaughter
Laura Eisenhower.
has been on TV lately. I've seen her a couple times. I don't know recently, but within the last 10 years. And she said that they made an agreement, and there's a name for that agreement. There was the something, they got a name for this whole agreement they had. But she said that it was to trade technology. The idea was they got recent tech.
Sure.
But then there was abduction that they had to agree to. Now imagine Eisenhower sitting there. So everybody's like, a lot of people say what a bad guy. But think about the position he's in. You're going to do it anyway.
They can pretty much do
anything
permission.
you want.
Yeah, you can do it without their permission. But to get permission meant
Right.
that any other entity like the Galactic Federation, for example, assuming they're positive, which I don't know if they are, and could be no protection.
Right.
Because Eisenhower gave his consent, but he thought that he was doing the right thing.
Right.
Because in his way of thinking, which was completely understandable, they could destroy us at any time.
Right.
So he thought he was delaying the inevitable, giving us a chance to get caught up.
Yeah.
And just for letting them take our people for a little bit. And if I were in his position, knowing what I knew at the time, what he knew at the time, I think it would be hard to justify doing anything different. But I wonder what sort of karma was created.
Yeah.
By his approach. Now, he was deceived. Let's be clear.
Right.
I think Laura even says that he was deceived. But these abductions, it might sound harmless. Oh, yeah, we're just going to sample your DNA and we're just going to... I think they're not just sampling. I think they're also taking eggs from females. And, the first story you told, potentially a sperm from males.
Yeah.
And they're creating hybrid beings because they're trying to get back to their original state. Now, another hypothesis, guys, about why the tall whites are trying to get back to their original state is that these hybrids are being created so that the whites can take their consciousness. And because the hybrids will have a vibration that is between human and tall white, they can take their soul and put it into that hybrid.
Wow.
The hybrid is the bridge.
Back, basically.
The hybrid is yes, they become ensouled again.
Wow. Well, they call us containers. You've heard that.
The
I've
body's
heard that
a
4
container.
or 5 different. The bodies are containers.
I believe that entirely. Like I've come to believe that entirely. And I think there's enough in a lot of world religions that not all, but enough that's I'm not bothered by the notion of that at all. But I will say that that's the reason for hybridization. That is a hypothesis about why there's hybridization. Because imagine if you're a human and you're trying to splice yourself into, I'll use an example we all know and love, a dog.
Right.
There's such a difference between what a dog can do and what you can do as a human that it's not compatible as a form.
Right.
As a container. The container's not compatible. So in the mind of a dog is not yet evolved enough to contain the things that, we do. So it's the same thing with vibration. If you are a tall white and you have a certain level of knowledge, would you want to be transported into a container that can't allow you to implement what you know? Just in general.
Or even physically. I mean,
well, and then the DNA is, suppose if they're splicing DNA, and let's say our DNA is more sophisticated, and theirs, since it's so broken, is less sophisticated.
It's like some K-Pax shit.
It's all that, man. I mean, it's like I'm only conjecturing because I don't know, but these are hypotheses that I've heard, and I gotta admit, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Why folks would be abducted of all different races, all across the planet. It's not exclusive to white, Aryan-looking people.
Oh, this isn't an American thing either. Yeah. This is worldwide and millions. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, let me ask this: we had up until the 1800s or late 1700s, 1800s, late 1800s. Our timeline was just like going gradually upwards.
Yep.
You know, just gradually.
Slope.
And then we had the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
In technology, and we started advancing at a rapid rate. I mean,
you mean technologically versus morality wise and all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just talking.
Parse that.
We had like brick houses, which were formerly like huts.
Sure.
And then now we have like it just immediately we had sky rises.
It really didn't take that long. You're
Not
right.
long at all. We
really
had
didn't.
radio, we had TV, we had
It's called Roswell.
No, this is before Roswell, though. This is before Roswell.
He's talking about the Tesla times.
The Tesla times.
Oh, right.
Edison. I just stayed in Hotel Edison in New York City, and it's just fascinating. That
Beautiful.
Thomas Edison flipped the switch on that hotel and turned the lights on.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
alternating current.
And so, where I'm getting at is if we see these pictures, these art renderings of UFOs or UAPs or whatever from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, how come we didn't get that technology until much later? If we're doing like reverse engineering.
That might be a timeline we just don't understand.
Did they not want us to have that technology? Because if you look at these, if you hear the stories from 2,000 years ago, ancient aliens, we just went and listened to these guys talk. They were here.
Right.
According to them, they were here. They moved mountains. They built mountains. They did all this stuff, except for give us the technology. Unless there are some theories that we did have that technology.
Oh, certainly. I kind of believe that we did, and then we're kind of a species with amnesia, intentionally so.
But where did it go?
What do you mean, where'd it go?
Where did all the stuff go? Where did the drills go? Where did the radios go? Where did all this stuff go?
Well, a good point. But if you think somebody robs a grave in
was it millions of years and the stuff just disintegrated?
Or it's been taken?
Can I pose something?
Sure.
I think there's two things. The civilization's been restarted several times, not once, but several times, by floods primarily. A comet once, an asteroid another time. So again, so we also know from the likes of Göbekli Tepe and
South America.
Yeah. Punka Putu.
Yeah.
I think I said that wrong. Those places, we know that sort of tech existed well before even we knew until recently. The point I'm making is civilization's been restarted. So imagine the people who came, ancient alien theory, the people who came from another planet because their planet was destroyed or dying or whatever, had the elongated skulls. They had some of their technology enough to settle here, kind of lost in space. But after cataclysm after cataclysm, they couldn't hold on to it. And so they had to restart too. So a lot of that stuff came before maybe the fourth or fifth reset. And they just could not maintain it. And they didn't have it, enough of it. And they didn't know how to do it. And the people who knew how to make it were gone. So imagine if you had seen an iPad 50 years ago. You pick this thing up.
Like that lady in the Charlie Chaplin movie.
Exactly. you wouldn't know what to do with it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's this piece of glass. What is this? You wouldn't know how to turn it on. You wouldn't have an operating system to do anything with it.
Right.
It's the same. And even if you were able to look at it 50 years ago, you wouldn't understand the intricate circuitry or any way to make it work or to remake it. You would not know how to do that. So I think that's what happened to the drills and the really, intricate stuff that we were able to make. And then corollary to that, we've all heard about the Mayans. They had as much tech as anyone else, but we see them as very primitive.
But
right?
Do you think all this is after the Neanderthals? Do you say Neanderthal or Neanderthal?
Neanderthal is what I usually say.
Both are fine.
No, you need to say Neanderthal. Talking about.
I've heard it both ways. I grew up saying Neanderthal. But
what kind of Neanderthal taught you that?
I've seen Reddit arguments on stuff like this.
It's both.
Neanderthals.
Neanderthals. Depends on who said it first.
Nantes.
So the Mayans, for all intents and purposes, many believe, at least the priest class of the Mayans, went off planet. They just ascended. They were taken up in a spaceship. They covered up their cities and they left. And that doesn't mean every single one of them did, but a lot of them did. And so, okay, there you go. That's a case of they took it with them.
It was like, what's his name?
Quetzalcoatl.
Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah. And they took it with them. So, okay, I've just thrown a whole bunch of stuff at the wall. But I do believe that there is something to each of these theories now.
Well, okay. But they did leave behind a lot of writing talking about the things that they had.
They did.
So another thought here is that whatever, in recent times, whatever that has been found has been taken.
Sure.
They talk about the basement of the Vatican.
And the Smithsonian.
And being the most incredible place, sci-fi heaven down there. Right.
Sure.
So some things could be, to control the population, we talk about that often. If we all got together and we knew how capable we were as a species, this would all be over. I mean, I think we have a lot of powers and a lot of, in our minds. Yeah. But if we also had some of that technology that could, change the course of things, then now we're in control again. So I think a lot of it, in I think recent times anyway, has been taken and put somewhere. Because why would they write about it and tell you everything they had but never leave you anything either? It's not just a tease. I think there's something to be said for that, possibly.
Do we have the consciousness to wield it?
Right, probably not.
I don't think so.
And what would
not
we do
from what
with
I've
it?
seen. We just invaded Ukraine.
We blow up the moon.
Yeah, there are those among us who don't behave well.
Yep.
And potentially the three at this table could wield it.
So do you
how many others?
Tech.
See?
Throwing it back to the reasons why some people are targeted,
for abduction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's some
bloodlines.
That's right, because a lot of families have been. Well, I mean, you have your own sightings, and in your family had sightings before that.
Yeah.
So one thought is it's RH, R negative and R positive.
Mm-hmm.
One is being kind of bled out, no pun intended. The other one is being increased, and I don't know because I'm not going to be for sure. It's either positive or negative, and you'll see that in often.
That's hard. Those glasses.
Are they? This is abduction day, man. I
gotta look as crazy as possible.
It's a special day. But the idea
so it's a scientific thing
that's right, and they're finding a lot of
who is they are finding.
David Jacobs, Dr. David Jacobs, and then he was with Bud Hopkins. Those are kind of a team. There were quite a few researchers that have put that
Not
down.
Bud. Bill Tompkins.
Not Bill Tompkins.
It's Bud. There's another Tompkins. His name is Bud. So
anyway,
tell me about the story that those gents have about the theories they have about.
Yeah, so there's two factions.
Blood.
And this is really interesting. Well, the blood for sure. So the thought is that one is basically has alien parts in it. The R negative or R positive.
RH negative.
Yeah,
it's the negative.
It's the negative one.
Yeah.
That's
so
one
is that
they're
like
trying to continue with?
When somebody says I'm type O negative, So RH negative.
The RH factor is positive or negative.
So you also have the blood
The blood
type.
Type, yes.
So this is completely different.
Yes.
Okay.
Here, do you know the places that the blood types are prevalent? Do you know the different the reasons? So O is African, so old world. Okay, and
Wow,
I may
I'm an
get
O.
I may
I'm
get
O.
some of
I'm
this.
African, huh?
You probably are, or your people were. A is sort of the mountain regions. You have Celts and Basques are A, and AB is the new blood. Even some Asians are A. A and AB blood developed after we became agrarian and settled and started, eating grains and things like that.
You are so damn smart. I love that you're here.
Setting us
I could
right.
listen to you all day.
That's
Yeah,
right.
let's
Thank
hear
you.
it.
And then the AB versions of blood are, islanders.
And what about the RH?
The RH factors are kind of unknown,
Right.
but it's my understanding that the negative is much more rare in all blood types, but especially A and AB. Are very
I'm
rare.
ADHD positive.
There you go. At least you're positive, right?
So so there
could go
is
either
some
way.
sort of, and I don't think it's 100%, but they did find some similarities with blood type. That is something you can look into, and that is something that they've talked about.
In the recent pandemic that we've all been enduring, there were some early sort of, I'll say, paper studies on the different blood types and who got COVID the worst. At least the first iteration of COVID, not Omicron, from Omicron on, no,
Right.
but the first original COVID. And it was said that A got it much worse than O, and O was pretty much metabolized it and got very mild symptoms, but that A got it really bad.
Yeah. And I'm O positive, and I've never gotten it.
That's really wonderful.
It's interesting.
So they don't do a ton of studies on blood, the relationship between blood and certain viral things. They're here and there, and I will say, unlike so many things with this COVID, a lot of stuff has been discredited, but I don't actually trust the discreditation because there's so much misinformation in general that even when it's from a valuable source, you're still not sure anymore.
Right.
So I only raise that to say, correlation does not mean equal causation. You don't know. But I found it interesting that types A tended to get the virus a lot harder. It tended to hit them harder.
That came around pretty early. That was a pretty early study that they had done, and it was on the original.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I remember
so
that.
Don't know how that has changed since the various iterations, but
This episode will have a disclaimer.
yeah. Again, we're not even making any
If you're all
assumptions
positive,
about
don't
it.
ever worry about it. You're fine. You'll
No.
never ever get it.
No. I just found it fascinating. So talking about blood types and different people, why do we look different?
Yeah.
Why do we look different? I still find that fascinating. I mean,
And why do most of these beings all look the same?
Well, no, but I think that's interesting too, because just like, we have all different kinds of us. You see these small changes even in the grays. I mean, there's some that have little pointier noses.
sure.
There's some that have different eyes. They may not be quite as big almond. They can be a little smaller. Some of them you see a pupil in. Some of them are taller.
So you're saying it's not as monolithic as we might think.
Right.
I'm not really focused.
Well, and
I don't
they're
know.
also
Not focused on
supposedly like more of an intellectual being.
The tall whites, for sure.
Well, I mean, just the aliens in general, right?
Right.
Because we're still stuck in this more narcissist, like, instinctual
Adolescence.
animal instinct.
It's our egoic and reptilian brain.
Yeah.
Our ego, which is, I guess, more esoteric, and the reptilian brain, which is the physicality. Yeah,
Did
it
you
is
say
interesting.
reptile?
I said the reptilian brain,
okay.
the
Oh, okay. All right.
amygdala.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know a little something about reptiles.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Draco.
Draco.
I did not say that. So
Oh,
yeah,
well, so
you go ahead.
the two different factions we were talking about. So, and I don't always all get these names right, but I do know these two different, they're two teams really. Dr. David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins were kind of on one side of this. And there's others. I mean, they both wrote books.
Okay.
Obviously, David Jacobs wrote quite a few, but he believed that they aren't here to help us and evolve us. They're truly just here to get their own DNA and possibly win us out by these humbrids. They're calling it humbrids, where supposedly the theory is that they're dropping people down here that are both alien and human.
I agree.
And
Yeah,
slowly
I've heard
they
that.
are kind of repopulating the place, the Earth, with this new species.
For what reason?
Because we can't get the shit right, and it's time they want it for whatever, just like anything. You could think of taking over a country.
Right, but I'm just trying to get at like what.
What's the motivation?
Well, even beyond that, like where are they? If
Where
that's
are the
case,
humbrids?
Yeah, where are they?
Well, supposedly,
They look a
there
lot
are
like
quite
you.
a few of them, and they're all around, and they're going to baseball games, and they're at grocery stores, and
You don't know.
and it's so hard to believe. But David Jacobs and all his studies and the people he's talking to, he's saying that they're all around, and there's people that take care of them. Like they come down. The abductors are actually showing them around, getting them apartments. And it's so unbelievable, but there are some stories that people, said this is actually happening. Now, you're right. You don't have one in captivity, and you're not trying to, figure them out, so I don't know.
But they know it?
Yeah. Yeah. Supposedly know it.
So
This
And
theory's
the
hard.
hybrids. And
they're
the,
supposed to make it right, but it's not right. It's
Right.
getting worse.
Right.
I don't think you can fix it. And this is part of the whole timeline thing,
Right.
the time travel thing.
Right.
If they can go back far enough in the past, can they fix their problem in the future?
Mm-hmm.
And can they fix the mistakes they made in the future?
Mm-hmm.
And apparently this hybrid program is one of the ways in which they believe they can't fix it in the future, but they can replace themselves and keep their consciousness going
Mm-hmm.
in a hybrid container.
So the abductions is part of that program.
Yes.
Right. And they aren't always, 90% are somewhat of a sperm egg situation. It's the old sperm and egg situation. But there's another one that seems to come up often is they'll teach them things about, you'll sit there in front of a screen. You'll learn about things about, how bad the world's going to get. There's all these prophecies that kind of come out of it. And then I know in a couple, and one in particular, I don't remember the guy's name, but they showed him what do you do in a catastrophic situation? How do you herd the humans onto the ship? Almost the thought that, or exactly the thought that, when all this goes down, and Independence Day happens, that they're going to be there to help shepherd the people onto the ships or help solve, to help the situation that they created. So there's a takeover camp and there's a helping evolve camp. And they're very distinctly different.
Wow.
Yeah. We did talk a little bit about the solar flash in the past.
EVPs?
Yeah. But the solar flash specifically, where the sun basically sneezes and resets, communications, at least, if not all technology on our planet would be fried and unusable.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have gotten to the point where we can take an atom a particle and damn near create nothing out of it, like the Higgs boson, the God particle, right?
Yep.
Just imagine what an advanced technology like that,
even just 1,000 years advanced of us, on planets that are millions and millions of years older than ours, which we've already determined. They're saying there's trillions of galaxies out there.
Yep.
So if they want,
Highly
here's the theory on the Earth. Why take over this place when there's probably endless ones to look at?
Well,
to
like
take over?
I brought up during the Moon episode, what's his name? Seth Shostak has written that there's in our galaxy alone, there's over 300 million Earth-like
Goldilocks zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why even go through why even step on the ants? Why not just move to the next place? And if they wanted to do that, they could have done it a whole lot easier a couple hundred years ago. Not that it'd be hard for them anyway, but why all this time of seeing them and then nothing happened? There has really been no takeover, unless you consider the fact that the hybrids, the humebrids, are being planted here to do it in another way. The takeover is something we won't even really notice.
I don't think they can come back here. I don't think they're strong enough to be in the energy of this planet in this time. So they have to create these hybrids or humebrids or however the word you used.
Humebrid.
They have to create this other form in order to be able to exist, because they're too frail. They're too damaged to exist in this radiation environment here. So I think it's fundamentally why. There are only so many of them. That's why the Greys are the ones doing the work, because they're essentially biologic drones. They're not alive.
Right. So the tall whites could be somewhat frail.
Them. Yes.
And
they're all mind.
Yeah.
Think about the Avatar movie the first time. The soldier, Jake, who was in this pod. His avatar was vigorous, but his body was wasting.
Yeah.
And he still had to eat, and he still had to sleep, and he still had to do all these things. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you're a tall white, even if your mind is so powerful, and maybe you have telepathy, and maybe you have telekinesis, and you have all these powers, right? But your body cannot stay here, and you're dying.
Right.
Maybe you're 2,000 years old, but you're dying, and
Right.
you don't want to die. So then what are you going to do? You're going to travel back in time. You're going to do anything you can to prolong your existence.
Right.
And if you can't reproduce and there's nothing left for you, what are you going to do?
You got to go back to the time that you could have.
Before it changed.
Yeah.
Before you made the fundamental mistake
Right.
to splice your DNA into other things
Right.
and turn AI or what the mistake was. You're going to come back here. You're going to abduct healthy people, and you're going to breed a new version of yourself that can survive.
Mm-hmm.
That just resonates with me.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's true,
No.
but dang, it's a good movie. Somebody
it's
make
a
this
great
movie. Luc Besson, please make this movie. So
Yeah.
I that's, when you start thinking about abduction like that, or you start thinking about hybridization, you can almost start to feel sorry for those beings that are going through this. At the same time, they failed their initiation as beings. And the things that they're perpetrating, without our consent, by the way,
Yeah.
are an affront and in defiance of cosmic law. You are a sovereign being.
Right.
You've not given your consent or your consent to be violated in this way.
Right.
And Mr. Eisenhower doing so does not speak for you.
Right.
You weren't even alive when he was a president.
Right.
How can they still be using that excuse?
And okay, so put on top of that the fact that if you were abducted, and everybody thinks it's a crazy tinfoil hat, let's say you really were abducted, you were basically raped, and you can't tell anybody about it because
Yes.
they're all going to think you're crazy.
Yeah.
So, nowadays, if somebody's raped, it's a bit, you
It's a
really
big deal
take that,
now.
tell me, do not shut me off, show me the emotions, give it all to me.
Finally got to that point.
But with abductions, you're a lunatic.
It's
but
still taboo.
You got raped.
Yeah.
I mean, the anal probe thing's real. That wasn't
It's
just
still-
something that came out of South Park.
It's still taboo.
That was Whitley Strieber
Yeah.
that had supposedly had a alien probe, and then South Park came out and he was writing books about it, and then South Park came out and made fun of it, and it really hurt him. I mean,
Yeah.
financially, everything.
Yeah.
Basically, the guy was raped, and then he was made fun of on South Park for it.
Didn't Michael Salla introduce the Eisenhower's theory, or was it before that?
It was before that. Michael Salla's been the person that has, I think, very effectively promoted that theory.
I like him.
And he's friends with Laura, and they've been friends for a decade or more. I believe Laura was partially responsible for bringing it forth, but Salla has a lot of credibility because of his background. I'll say that there's another group out of Atlanta, and they are all remote viewers. And
that's another episode.
it is,
take that one on.
but this group of remote viewers have also gone back to the time and seen this these moments when this happened, and have described the agreements that were made, the manipulation that went on to get Eisenhower to make the agreement, and then there's a whole lot of events around it. We probably need to have another conversation about this, but I think the impetus was that Admiral Byrd, after World War II, Admiral Byrd went from the United States, went down to Antarctica.
Yeah.
We talked about this. He went down to Antarctica. He was he was a noble warrior, okay? A man had so much integrity. Went down there and got his butt kicked.
Yep.
And we talked about this, and he found out that the Germans actually had a lot of alien technology, and that he managed to make it out, and that was the impetus for Eisenhower to sign that agreement. Mm-hmm. And so here we are, all these years later. And the agenda, what was the agenda back then? If they could have taken over then, they would have, but they didn't.
Right.
So there's a reason. And I think this hybridization program and this
so why would there have to be an agreement?
Well, that's the thing.
It's
That's what
cosmic
we were
law.
talking about before.
It's cosmic law.
Oh, that's fascinating.
You have to get permission, or, then the white hat extraterrestrials who wouldn't allow this to happen could swoop in and knock them out. But if the species gave permission, well, the cosmic law says you can't interfere. It's non-interference.
That's a trip. I've never heard that.
And so they can't interfere unless we ask, and they can't interfere unless we are aware. And so awakening, which is what we're doing right now, is we're sharing this information, and those who are attracted to it will explore it. Mm-hmm. And they can then take their place as sovereign beings who are knowledgeable about cosmic law and their sovereign nature. Until you do that, you're not awake. Until you understand what's really happening at this highest level, how can you possibly consent? Because you're being manipulated.
Right.
Manipulation's everywhere. I mean, our own government does it. I mean, it's I've never noticed it before. I really didn't. I didn't start noticing the kind of manipulation we're talking about, I want to say, until about a decade ago.
So one of the last episodes, I can't remember which one, Lundy, you brought up when was this triggered in your life?
Yeah.
Oh, when did you start getting fascinated with this topic?
Yeah, and I went on this big tangent about watching cartoons and shit. But that was in a roundabout, long-winded way of saying I've always been this way. I've always been interested in this stuff. And I don't know if like people who are open to this kind of, receptive to these vibrations or, the idea. However, I've seen stuff.
Right.
So I don't know if it's because I'm open to it and they know, or I'm thinking I'm saying something because it's, like a figment of my imagination.
Right. Or they sense your energy and your consciousness, and
Or
you're
I'm
able to see them.
I'm pre-chosen.
Right. Oh, that's a whole nother thing. We got to get to that
You
sometime.
chose yourself.
Well, before you
grandfather-
even came here.
My grandfather, I'll superimpose it
Right.
on here right now. You'll see it.
Okay.
My grandfather drew a picture of something that he saw back in like 1971, I think it was. He was out in his field on his farm, and he saw something, and he drew a picture of it, and I have it. And
Wow.
yeah, and it's like a cone, and I'm like making a cone shape with these two things that come down and something underneath it. It could have been a weather balloon or whatever, but, it runs in the family. This kind of curiosity.
And
runs.
sensitivity.
Yeah, and sensitivity
Even
runs in the family.
that's.
And I'm not
that's
saying that I'm open to
fascinating.
be abducted, but I'm always looking up. I was telling somebody recently, I was flying back to the Midwest I was flying from LA to, I was flying from Palm Springs to Dallas. And I'm looking, it's the middle of the day. I'm looking out the window. I know you fly a lot, Tik. I was looking out the window, and, you're always looking for something. You're like looking and looking. And by God, this freaking like 747, you could almost see the people in the windows. Flew the opposite direction.
Oh my gosh.
Whoa.
I was like, holy
Well, that's
crap.
not supposed to happen.
Well, coming back on the way to New York, I'm on one of these small
Regional jets.
regional Delta jet,
Yeah.
and we're flying, and as I'm thinking about that, I see like a little Piper flying, a couple thousand, like 1,000 feet below us or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm like, there's another plane. Like, what is the deal here?
So that's something that happens to you
Yeah.
Yeah.
in your presence.
But
That's interesting.
most people are looking out the window and they're not paying attention,
Yeah, true.
Or looking up. That people don't look up enough. It was 4th of July.
Oh yeah.
The stars were really out.
They were so beautiful.
And we were out a little bit from the city, so we were at a friend's house that was, 10 miles out of the city. And, you could see 10%, not even, but that's still a lot, compared to what's really out there, like in Arizona, if you go someplace.
Yeah.
It's
light pollution.
unbelievable what's up there.
Yeah, there's a lot of light pollution here.
I'm like, this is the same stuff that the original human
Yeah.
looked up and saw.
That's right.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
And then what you're seeing right now is 1% of
You know
what's
what
out
we
there.
didn't even talk about was the picture that Betty Hill drew.
Oh, the star map?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's true. We didn't.
We
Can
didn't
you
even talk
splice
about
it back in?
Well, one of the aliens that was doing, she called him the
Scientist,
examiner.
the examiner.
The examiner.
Betty Hill called him the examiner.
The examiner.
Okay.
Was the one communicating, and they were, she was frightened, and he kept saying, "Don't worry about being frightened" or whatever. I can't remember exactly the conversation, but one of the things was like, she goes, "Where are you from?"
Oh.
And he like somehow showed her a picture. This is where we're from. I don't know if he pointed to a picture or like something popped up or whatever. And during regression, she drew that picture. And later, it turned out, and you can see pictures of different, like the actual, what is it? Something reticuli.
Zeta
Reticuli.
Reticuli.
We were like, Zeta Reticuli.
Yeah.
Then I know what the beings look like from Zeta Reticuli.
That's where he said he was from.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah, those are definitely, yeah.
and this was before
They're
that was
scary.
This was part of that article that the guy from the Astronomer, Astronomy magazine.
Tried calling bullshit on.
Yeah.
He did, yeah.
And he couldn't because
Well-
she drew the map.
Well, that's right. But the map, it's not just a bunch of dots. The way she drew it, they showed travel routes. They showed trading routes. I mean, it was quite elaborate.
And the two main stars that
Yeah.
we can see in our sky was part of the map.
And that was the configuration. And it really was. There was two astronomers, one really well-known
We can
one, a
only
woman.
see the two main stars. The
Correct.
something reticuli and something. I can't
Yeah.
remember.
They're close. They're
Zeta 1
doing-
and Zeta 2.
Yeah,
Zeta 1 and Zeta 2, they're close, but that's all we can see. We can't see that other stuff.
right.
So how did she know that was there?
Correct. And when they were able to see that, and this one really famous astronomer got into it and mapped it out 3D with all the math.
And because one of the things that was in question was her drawing had like one of the Zeta 1 or Zeta 2 like real far away, and the actual positioning, it's not as far. And this guy that you're talking about came out and was saying,
It's a woman.
the woman came out and said that it could be because of the way that
The perspective.
the perspective
Yeah.
of those beings.
Mhm.
Yeah,
When they showed it to her,
true.
it was a different perspective.
Her name was Fry. I think her last name was Fry.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. And they all but
Do you
proved
know
it.
that J. Allen Hynek interviewed them, and so did what's his name, Stanton Friedman. Stanton
Ooh,
Friedman.
that guy was something else.
And J. Allen Hynek came out and before he passed away said that he didn't believe in extraterrestrials at all. He was like, yeah, he came out and he was like, I
They're
take all
humans. They're humans.
Well, in that book, it said that's when he kind of started to change his mind about things, was the Betty and Barney Hill case, when he started coming around, because there's just so much,
It
so
probably,
much there.
It could have also been pressure.
Yeah, right.
Well,
but-
sure.
Well, before you die, what's the pressure?
Yeah. But Stanton Friedman.
On your
Stanton
descendants.
Friedman.
Stanton Friedman.
Well, there's a lot of names here we've given out. I mean, I do that with podcasts. I'll hear some. I'll look them
Better
up.
check
We've
that out.
given like a
Go down
million
that
names.
rabbit hole. There's a few rabbit holes that have
Yeah.
been opened up for you today.
Yeah, and they're
Lots
not
and
all
lots of-
Greys. There are a lot of other ones that we didn't get to. It seemed to be the Greys. There's a story that we can start to at least piece together, but there's many other species that
Yes.
have been in the abduction scenario.
Yes.
Quite a few
Yes.
that are way different.
I guess.
Comment if you're listening to this and you think we're full of shit, or if you got more information to give us, comment
We
on it.
definitely
and-
want to hear.
Yeah,
I
definitely
mean,
wanna hear.
we're just putting theories and hypotheses that we've learned about and trying to just shape an opinion. So we're really open to being.
Absolutely. That's why it's called gray area.
That's it.
This are just thoughts. Get you think different.
Yeah, we're gonna discuss all kinds of topics.
That's
Topics galore.
What's
Well-
next? What's
well, I
next
feel like
one?
this was really fun, guys.
Yeah.
It was.
Thank you.
What's the next week? What are we gonna do
I don't
next?
know.
I don't know either.
We ought to. So, abduction kind of got us a little dirty. We need
Yeah.
to cleanse. We need a cleansing one,
Some fluoride,
like frequencies or healing or.
Something sweet.
pesticides,
Plant medicine. I don't know.
GMOs.
GMOs. That sounds fun.
There's fluoride in the water.
Boy, we don't need any more doomsday.
I
How
know.
about something uplifting?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
maybe we go to the ascension stuff next or something.
Maybe.
All right.
The what was it, the power of
The Law of One.
The
Law of One.
That's going to be a series.
Yeah.
That's a lot of information. But we can start.
Can we start with the law 3 and move our way down?
5. We'll do 5.
3 is a magic number.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.